Rebecca Avery, I thought of you yesterday. I read an article. It said the word metadata 3 times, and I was like, I got to talk to Rebecca about this.
I love that I'm the metadata guy.
It just immediately happened. And then, as it turned out, you had strong opinions because the piece was about Gracenote and the fact that they are in the midst of new lawsuits because they are saying their metadata and their schema is showing up in OpenAI. So they have opened up a lawsuit. There was a little bit of info about it, but you and I both immediately sort of went back and forth, and it sort of became a very quick article that we co-authored together. But I thought it might be helpful for us to just have a little context around it as well. So before I throw to any questions, where are your opening thoughts on this? And when you saw this, what was your immediate reaction?
I like that you and I get to have a conversation about this because it was striking to both of us. I think maybe almost equally largely, but probably for very different ways, right? My background is in operations. I work now in organizational health and operational efficiency. But I understand that every department, at a network sits on the value chain, and the bloodline to the value chain is metadata. So I see things very differently. I've worked with Gracenote at several different companies. I understand a lot about their business model. I think that the lawsuit is extremely interesting. I, do have the obvious questions of like, hey, OpenAI, like, how did their IDs end up in your system if they didn't okay that? Which is a very foundational question. But also, hey, Gracenote, like, why are you talking about your IDs so much? And I think a lot of that is because there is some metadata that Gracenote generates absolutely from scratch. They were the guys years ago that were already talking about mood, and they were talking about like scene level metadata. And companies started licensing that. But also a lot of the data that they get is data that was acquired from their customers.
Right.
And so that's why they're talking about things like schemas and IDs. I don't understand how you put value to a schema or how you have proprietary data schemas when the whole goal of a schema is to create a translatable model.
Right. It's interoperability at its core.
It feels like a commodity to me, but I think those details will come out. But I do think that the idea is interesting that they're talking about that so much because it probably took them finding their idea in a consistent way for them to lay out the argument that this is indeed not just metadata, but Gracenote metadata. And this is where it starts to, I think, go into your world, because media companies are starting to use automation and AI and fuzzy logic and a lot more audience metrics to generate their own proprietary metadata. It's those harder tool asset IDs that are of more value to their customers.
Yeah, I mean, from the AI side, I think there's a direction and a trend that I've talked about a lot, which effectively is, and maybe it's an obvious one, but we haven't said it in this way, but what we're effectively doing is trying to allow AI to make media machine readable. Like we want the systems that we're working with to understand content the way that a human being would, and that means that it needs a lot of additional contextual data outside of the individual frame or audio sample that it has for a given moment. Because even as we watch a thing, we immediately start relating things to it. Oh, I know that person from this show. I've watched them over 4 seasons on this show. All kinds of information just immediately starts getting connected. And that, in fact, is sort of exactly what we get into in the article, which is sort of creating knowledge graphs around content. And at its core, you need structured data and metadata in order to deliver on that context.
Absolutely. Yeah. It needs to be structured. It needs to be clean. Those are services that Gracenote provides. There's also, I think, been a lot of movement lately with companies who understand now kind of like what you're talking about and actually what the value is that's generated by what you're talking about. And so there are companies like Cineverse, who are just like these small, independent workhorse companies that are doing amazing things. Like they're not afraid to experiment and be innovative. And figure out, because it's not just about how to get your content discovered. You have to get your content discovered first. People are acquiring entire libraries because you can use a title or two as part of your viewership funnel, but it's the volume of your content that really moves the needle on revenue. And that volume of content is owned by several other of your competitors. So how do you make yours the discoverable version? So it's time to have more uniqueness just for business strategy advantage. There's a million ways you can create organizational health and operational efficiency with better metadata. And there is an enormous amount of danger, just like with any vendor, right? It's like any tech vendor. When you get into them, if you don't have some kind of a divorce agreement or exit strategy, when that vendor decides to do something that's this far or this far or this far from your business strategy, it hurts you. And you're stuck trying to make up for the fact that your outside vendor who doesn't work for you can't do these last little, they can't run that ball the last 20 yards anymore. And that is such a big risk when it comes to depending entirely on content IDs, for instance, from Gracenote. Like, I hope those map to internal IDs or IDER IDs or some other industry standard that you can still tell what you've got in your library if you ever decide to downgrade or end your relationship with Gracenote or anybody, IMDb.
Right. Yeah, I think that's probably, if you're on the outside of the industry looking in, it's probably a shocking thing for someone to say that you own a large catalog of content, but you have to buy the information about it from a third party, even though they got that information.
License the information about it from a third party. You still don't really own it, do you?
True, right, exactly. And so I think that is part of the conundrum that's here, or it's at least part of the difference in this particular lawsuit than some of the others, say the New York Times or others that have sued about content. Because ultimately they are talking about sort of not the content itself so much, but like the structure that content came in that is now replicable in some way via an LLM.
Yeah. And I mean, maybe this is a brand new thing, or maybe I've been missing something, but I've been working in metadata for a really long time. I've written specs for like big platforms. It's never occurred to me to copyright my schemas.
Right.
It never occurred to me. And like after I left Pluto TV, I'd be talking to other people when I started consulting, and they'd say, "Oh yeah, we're using the Pluto XML spec," and my response was, "Hey, cool, I wrote that." But it never occurred to me that was a proprietary thing, because I spent my entire time at Pluto trying to get 200 content partners to use exactly that. I wasn't charging them for it. We just needed it to work.
You mentioned standards in here, and I think standards is an important part of it. You mentioned the name IDER briefly. For those who are unfamiliar, you mentioned it in the article as well, but do you want to sort of elaborate on who they are and what they do?
It's a nonprofit. It is a universal identifier. If you give me a second, I'll be able to pull up the URL. But they actually have been working for years globally to assign IDs to all the data. They do not have a proprietary schema. You don't have to like pay them a ton of money or try to you don't have to transform your entire data model. But they do provide IDs they started with movies and television. They're actually working right now very closely on sports and pulling together EPG specs using a lot of the major players, but blue chip companies, major studios are using IDER. So there's a lot of people out there that say, "Hey, there's no universal ID." There is, and they welcome you.
Right. So I think that, that's an important piece of the puzzle. I don't think it completely solves the broader AI problem I was talking about, which is systems have to contextually know content better in order to do the things we want it to do in this new era. But it's a great stepping stone towards it. That and interoperable systems begins to be the foundational work that could be missing in what's there to make it easier for these systems to talk to each other.
Yeah, I think it's the one big thing is when we've just gotten out of the growth at all costs phase in streaming, and now we have to retain the revenue that we get in the top line and actually turn it into profit. Right, we have to be as efficient as we possibly can, and so now we're actually really starting to look at metadata. But there are big companies who are still, as of 2 weeks ago, saying we are 100% on Gracenote, still completely on Gracenote. fine, that's great. If that's how you're running today, I suggest, like you should do with any vendor, you should take a look at what is the value, and is what you're paying them worth that, and what is it you're not doing because you're using an outside vendor. So, like a really pragmatic first thing that you could do, because it feels overwhelming, is to look at the ID systems that you're using, right? And say, is there an IDER? Is there an in-house? Is there something here that we can use to really fall back on as a proper framework, if we lose that? And then something that I know is very daunting, but honestly, I've done it. I've trained teams to do it. It takes a few days, which is unbelievable to people. But if you understand your data, just do engineers hate this. Do a spreadsheet, and just lay out what your data fields are, find the source of truth, and find the definition. And then
Right.
from there, the priorities really kind of start to write themselves. And you can come up with iterative plans to upgrade your entire data model.
Interesting. I want to sort of close out on maybe what the industry might be missing, or what maybe you hope comes out of this. If we sort of jump ahead 5 years, what do you think the industry is going to realize about metadata that they're just starting to appreciate today?
I think that I think that there's two areas in metadata that have been incredibly painful for media companies. One is rights, and the fact that just studios haven't been able to shake hands on what a rights data model looks like, or a rights schema looks like. And I think that is actually kind of starting to get solved a little bit. There are big networks that can't figure out today what do they have in their library as they're trying to expand into new markets.
Right.
It's finally gotten painful enough to fix. So I think that is going to resolve. And I think that there's going to be just a totally new way to look at metadata, where honestly, metadata is it's either going to be a commodity, and there's going to be common core kind of commodity stuff. It's very difficult to charge somebody money for the title of their own film.
Sure.
I think we might be done with some of that. And then there's also going to be this very deep proprietary model. So I think that what is out there and what's going back and forth is going to be more and more dependent on IDs and very basic data, and everything else is going to be these like deep proprietary models that are created with AI.
Got it. Well, thank you again for sort of coming together so quickly on it. Appreciate it. I love the way the piece came out. Hopefully everybody will enjoy it when they read it, and hopefully this helped give them a little extra context for why we were so passionate about it.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.